Most GM 6.2-liter owners have no idea their engine's oil specification quietly changed, and dealerships are not exactly rushing to call you about it. I have had 3 different trucks come through my shop in the last 2 months with lifter noise and metal in the oil filter, and every single one of them was still running the old Spec oil their owner bought because it was what they always bought. This is not a recall. It is not splashed across GM's website. It is a change most owners will never hear about until their engine is already making a ticking sound that should not be there. Today, I am walking you through exactly what changed, why GM made the change, and what it means for your Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, Suburban, Yukon, or Escalade if you are running a 6.2-liter V8 right now. Let's start with which engine we are actually talking about, because General Motors has used the 6.2-liter badge on more than one platform, and people mix them up constantly. The engine in question here is the Ecotec 3 6.2-liter internally coated L87 in the Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, Suburban, and Yukon, and L87 in the newer generation trucks starting around the 2019 model year refresh, along with the L8T used in General Motors' heavier-duty commercial applications. These are direct-injected aluminum block V8 engines that use active fuel management, GM's cylinder deactivation system that shuts down 4 of the 8 cylinders during light-load cruising to save fuel. That system is actually central to why the oil specification matters so much more on this engine than on a simpler, naturally aspirated V8 without cylinder deactivation. For years, GM specified Dexos 1 Gen 2 as the approved oil standard for these engines, typically in 5W30 viscosity. That spec was solid for its time, but GM has been quietly transitioning its lineup to Dexos 1 Gen 3, a revised standard with tighter requirements around oxidation resistance, timing chain wear protection, and most importantly for this engine, low-speed pre-ignition protection. Low-speed pre-ignition, often shortened to LSPI in service bulletins, is a phenomenon where the air-fuel mixture ignites prematurely under low RPM high-load conditions, and it produces a knock that can hammer piston rings and connecting rods hard enough to cause real mechanical damage over time. Turbocharged direct injection engines are the most vulnerable to LSPI, but GM's own internal testing found that the high-compression, direct-injected 6.2-liter was showing symptoms under certain driving conditions too, particularly in trucks doing a lot of towing or trailer work at low speeds. Dexos 1 Gen 3 includes a stronger additive package specifically engineered to suppress that pre-ignition event before it becomes a problem. Here is where it gets more relevant to active fuel management specifically. When your 6.2-liter deactivates 4 cylinders during cruising, the lifters for those cylinders collapse and stop actuating the valves entirely. That collapsing and reactivating cycle happens constantly during normal highway driving, sometimes multiple times per minute, depending on load. The oil film that protects the lifter bore, the pushrod, and the rocker arm assembly during that constant cycling has to be more shear stable than what a conventional non-AFM engine needs, because those components are working through thousands of extra activation cycles that a standard V8 lifter never experiences. Dexos 1 Gen 2 was adequate when this system was newer and mileage on these engines was lower, but GM's own technical service bulletins going back to around 2021 started flagging oil-related lifter failures and ticking noises specifically tied to oxidized or degraded oil film in the AFM lifter assemblies. I pulled a lifter assembly out of a 2016 Tahoe last year with over 140,000 miles that had visible varnish buildup inside the lifter bore, the kind of buildup that happens when oil breaks down under heat cycling faster than it should. That truck had been serviced on schedule its entire life, but always with a bulk conventional or basic synthetic blend that met the old spec on paper but did not carry the newer additive chemistry. A customer of mine, a contractor who runs a 2019 Silverado 2500 with the 6.2-liter engine, came in about 8 months ago complaining about a light tapping noise on cold start that would go away after a minute or two of warm-up. That is a classic early symptom of AFM lifter wear, and it usually means the oil film inside those lifter bores is not holding up the way it should during the deactivation and reactivation cycle. I checked his maintenance records and he had been diligent, changing oil every 5,000 miles like clockwork, but always with a basic synthetic blend from whatever store had the best price that week, meeting the older Dexos 1 Generation 2 rating rather than the current Generation 3 standard. We switched him over to a full synthetic Dexos 1 Generation 3 approved oil at his next service, and the tapping noise on cold start disappeared within about 3 oil change cycles. That is not a guarantee for every truck with lifter noise, because sometimes the wear has already progressed too far and a lifter genuinely needs replacement. But in his case, catching it early and correcting the oil chemistry solved the problem before it turned into a $4,000 lifter and camshaft repair. The viscosity side of this matters too, and it is worth explaining plainly because GM has shifted recommendations here as well, depending on model year and application. Earlier, L86 engines specified 5W30, while some of the newer L87 applications, particularly in the redesigned 2019 and later Silverado and Sierra, moved towards 0W20 for improved cold start flow and fuel economy certification purposes. Running the wrong viscosity is not always catastrophic on its own, but combined with an outdated additive package, it compounds the problem. A thinner oil that lacks the updated anti-wear and anti-oxidation chemistry breaks down faster under the heat cycling these AFM lifters generate, which accelerates exactly the kind of varnish and sludge buildup I found in that Tahoe. GM's owner's manuals and the Dexos website both list the correct current specification by model year, and it takes about 30 seconds to check, but almost nobody does because most owners just tell whoever is doing the oil change to put in whatever they normally use. There is also a cost angle here that deserves honest attention because Dexos 1 Gen 3 approved full synthetic oil typically runs a few dollars more per quart than older Gen 2 rated blends, and on an 8-quart capacity V8 like the 6.2L, that adds up to maybe $15 to $25 more per oil change depending on brand and where you buy it. Compare that to the real-world repair costs I am seeing on trucks with advanced AFM lifter failure, which routinely run between $2,000 and $4,000 once you account for lifter replacement, camshaft inspection, and the labor to access those components buried under the intake manifold. GM's own parts network prices a full AFM lifter set well into 4 figures before labor on many of these jobs because replacing lifters properly means pulling the intake, and once you are in that deep, most shops will recommend inspecting the camshaft lobes for scoring at the same time, since a failed lifter often means metal contamination has already reached the cam lobe surface. $15 extra at every oil change is a rounding error next to that kind of bill. I want to be fair here and say this is not some sinister cover-up on GM's part. Oil specifications evolve as engineering data comes in over years of real-world use, and Dexos 1 Gen 3 genuinely is a better formulation than what existed when these engines were first designed back in the early 2010s. GM does list the updated specification in service literature and on the Dexos certification website, and any dealership technician doing a proper oil change should be pulling the correct spec for your specific model year. The problem is not that GM hid this. The problem is that most independent shops, quick lube chains, and even some owners doing their own oil changes are still defaulting to whatever Dexos one oil is on the shelf without checking whether it carries the current Gen 3 certification. Because from the outside, a bottle labeled Dexos 1 approved looks identical whether it is Gen 2 or Gen 3 unless you actually read the fine print or check the certification number against GM's current list. If you made it this far, consider hitting like on this video and subscribing to the channel. It genuinely helps more people find honest, fact-based car breakdowns like this one. So what should you actually do if you are driving a 6.2-liter Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, Suburban, Yukon, or Escalade right now? First, check your owner's manual or the Dexos 1 certification lookup for your specific model year to confirm whether GM currently specifies Gen 2 or Gen 3 for your engine, since the transition happened gradually across different model years and trims rather than all at once. Second, when you get your next oil change, whether at a dealership or an independent shop, specifically ask for Dexos 1 Gen 3 certified full synthetic oil rather than just saying Dexos 1 approved, because that phrase alone does not guarantee you are getting the current formulation. Third, if you have already noticed a light ticking or tapping noise on cold start that fades after a minute of running, do not ignore it and hope it goes away on its own. That symptom pattern lines up closely with early AFM lifter wear, and catching it early with a proper oil change and a mechanic's inspection is dramatically cheaper than waiting until a lifter actually collapses or a cam lobe starts scoring. Fourth, if you tow regularly or spend a lot of time in stop and go traffic at low speeds under load, which is exactly the driving pattern most associated with low-speed pre-ignition risk, treat the correct oil spec as non-negotiable rather than a nice-to-have, because that is precisely the use case GM engineered the newer additive package to protect against. None of this means your 6.2-liter is a bad engine or that GM cut corners on the original design. These are genuinely strong, proven V8s that regularly cross 200,000 miles without major issues when they are maintained correctly. What it means is that maintaining them correctly now looks slightly different than it did a decade ago, because the oil chemistry that protects active fuel management components has legitimately improved, and running an outdated spec on a modern AFM-equipped V8 is quietly asking more of that oil than it was ever formulated to deliver. It is a small detail that costs almost nothing to get right and costs thousands of dollars to get wrong, and that is exactly the kind of quiet change that never makes headlines but absolutely deserves your attention if you actually want this engine to outlast the loan you are still paying on it. If you're enjoying this kind of deep dive, consider watching the next video where we break down the exact GM service bulletins covering active fuel management lifter failures model year by model year.